Hi, my name's Chris and welcome to the Double Loop podcast. In this episode we talk to Te Reira, one of Aotearoa's treasured artists. He's a comedian, storyteller, documentary maker. Please excuse the audio quality as we recorded this interview over Zoom. Let's get stuck into it. When you started out, when you were a young tyke growing up and you were here in the Waikato doing school, what was the moment you went, I'm going this way? What was there a spark there?
It was. I just realised I've got a mark on my top.
Time out.
It was watching. It was watching. The spark was watching Foreign Correspondent as a kid,
right.
with my parents, and we would sit down. And particularly, I was really fascinated with Afghanistan. There was a war there when I was a kid. There's still a war there, and I wanted to be a war correspondent. I wanted to go and tell stories. It wasn't the conflict. I just couldn't get my head around how people could live in a situation like this and go about their daily lives. I wanted to know when you're filming, cameras. It's what they leave out that I find really fascinating. What's outside the frame? What's behind the camera? Nobody knows what's there. It's my courtyard. And that was what fascinated me. Well, how do people go about living their lives in this environment? And I wanted to kind of go to these incredible environments. And I guess, there was that kind of inability to understand the concept of death when you're, a teenager who hasn't spent much time around it. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make war documentaries because I thought it would be exciting. And there was at some point this belief, I don't know when it came in, that I wanted to be a comedy war correspondent, and that the comedy would come from my ineptitude, which I very quickly realized I would have in abundance, but I would be using that as a gateway to bring people into a serious story. Now, quite when I had that realization, I don't know if it was at high school or early years of university, but there was a belief that you could tell serious stories through the use of humor, and thus people might end up watching something they wouldn't otherwise watch.
Right.
That was the kind of
and that's breaking down those barriers.
That's still the kind of mantra today. Nothing's changed in that.
So using humor to break that wall, that barrier.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of the storytelling thing is within any good comedian, any good comedy, there is a story element to it. There's, and when we lose ourselves in narrative transportation, and we get involved and buy into the story and things like that. That's when we can change people's minds. So were you always, of that? Is your family a comedy family? Is it a serious family? Did you grow up with that kind of influence? Because obviously
I remember there was always laughing. Dad always enjoyed wordplay. I remember him sitting down once writing like 100 things to do with like the word balls. And there was jokes. My uncle would always turn up and he would have Billy Connolly tapes. I never listened to a lot of comedy. I didn't even really know what stand-up was until like my second year of university, and I think I saw Alan Bro performing at a university event, and then I went, that's stand-up. So I didn't listen to a lot of stand-up. I watched a lot of comedy, but it was more, sketch or
Saturday Night Live.
Said, back in the 70s. No, never Saturday Night Live. Always English. So Benny Hill, the Two Ronnies, Les Smith and Jones.
Oh yes.
Didn't like the young ones. In fact, I only have really just in the last month watched most of the series of young ones.
Blackadder.
But I liked Blackadder, loved Blackadder. Anything that had a kind of particularly comedy that hit really close to truth. The Australian ones I loved. I really love work where you can almost not distinguish as to whether or not it's comedy. It's funny. So Frontline, The Games, Utopia, which is on now, made by the same people. We love that kind of British comedy. I was never a big fan of Monty Python. I probably didn't really watch it, and by the time I didn't understand it, because in a way those influences had already become part of things and moved on, so I wasn't seeing it at the beginning when it was changing those things, but I'm still fascinated by it. And then there became this kind of period where a lot of comics, UK comics and things, were getting picked up to front docos, and so I kind of thought, well, comedy might be a gateway into being seen as a presenter, and at the very least it was going to pay some bills in the meantime. But it wasn't something that I'd set out to do as a young person. I didn't look at stand-up comedy and go, I'm going to be a stand-up comic.
Right.
I didn't know what stand-up comedy was.
Yeah. And I mean, was that around the time of McFarlane Gadsby and Billy T and that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, McFarlane Gadsby. What else was there? Yeah, there's McFarlane Gadsby, Billy T, Fred Dagg, and then he went off to Australia and did some of the best work that's ever come out of the country. And then there was lots of stuff like skits and
yes, I remember that. Yeah,
Facial DBX, I think, various others in that kind of late 80s, early 90s kind of period. I got roped in. In fact, one of the first series I filmed was called Newsflash with Gibson Group, who were making skits, and it was an incredibly traumatic experience. I'm not going to say that it was a pleasant experience, but it was a learning experience.
So you were at university and you sort of got started picking up work at the same time, or did you?
I was doing well. I failed to do law, threw me out, by which I mean I didn't pass in the first year. I like to think it was a mutual decision. It wasn't. It was theirs. I was hopeless, and so I ended up doing drama, and there was a lot of comedy coming through drama. I was always interested in comedy. I did the Leavers dinner at Argyle House at Hamilton Boys. I was boarding there. I don't remember it, but I still have people coming up today who went, "Oh man, that speech you did at the Leavers dinner, and you roasted the masters," and it's like, "Oh, did I?" And another great alumni, also in broadcasting, James McConey. I think James remembers it, so I must sit down with James, and have a chat to him about it. But so there was always, I was not a sports person. I know it comes as a shock to people. So I was on the debating team. So I think then we got away trips.
Oh,
only about two. I think Auckland Grammar and. I don't know whether we debated Kelston or not, maybe Tauranga Boys. So I was doing that kind of thing. So words and storytelling and speaking and performance were there more so than that kind of sense of wanting to be behind the camera. I always wanted to be in front of the camera, or at the same time maybe directing, and making.
So you were sort of forming those kinds of basic ideas of what you liked and what you didn't like, and really sort of the first steps. And I guess one of the key things that people want to know is like, oh, I love this. I want. How do I break in? How do I get there? You obviously sort of had that step by step, that way of doing it incrementally.
Yeah, I mean,
was there a moment where you sort of like, you've made it?
Oh, look, it happened across a kind of a number of fields at the same time, like certainly the stand-up and that graduate and coming up to Auckland. I thought I'd made it. I think I got on a bit more after 10, which was a comedy competition. I made it through to the final of that. And then I'm trying to think what came first. Then I got picked up for, was it Newsflash? I think I did, maybe pulp comedy. So I did quite a few pulp comedies. And you think, and as a comic, you think if you get pulp comedy, when pulp comedy was on, I've made it at that kind of level. And then I'm trying to think, I think Newsflash happened. And Newsflash it was supposed to be a satirical news show. And I remember having a meeting with the great Dave Gibson and Chris Ellis, both of whom I like. And they pitched it as being this kind of, like the day-to-day, Chris Morris from the UK, like you were supposed to be able to watch it and you would not be able to tell that it wasn't real news, except that it was satirical. And it ended up about as far away from that as it was possible to be. And that was where the friction came in, that I thought we were making one thing and they turned out to be making exactly what they were making with skits and various other things, which were great shows, but not shows for me.
Well, did they headhunt you? Did they see you on stage somewhere, perform somewhere, and then go,
I don't know.
That's what we want to do?
Yeah, I think they did get in touch with me. I don't know whether I had to audition. And it was a great group of people. Mike King was there. Mark Wright, Lindy Jane Rutherford came in as the hosts, which was the point where I suddenly went, because they were massive stars through skits and all of that. And I kind of went, I thought we were supposed to be making something that people thought was with a whole lot of new and fresh faces. And they were great at what they did. Mike King was there, Michaela Rooney. I'm trying to think who else was in the writer's room. Even going into a writer's room and writing was a really weird concept. I didn't do that in my day-to-day basis. I was getting paid really great money. It was awesome. And then I suppose in some ways the first thinking about what that first big break might have been would have been hidden in the numbers with Mark McNeil. 3-part series. Rupert McKenzie directed it, and it was really great. Mark is a great. Mark loves making TV, and he's such a fascinating character. And he's made some great stuff. Most recently, all kinds of stuff. He did Dark Tourist with David Farrier, much to my eternal anger, because I remember discussing that series with him like 20 years ago. And he went, "Wouldn't it be great if we did this?" And he ended up doing it with Dave, and Dave is he's so good at it. But Mark just loves TV, and I love Mark because he's a great producer and whatnot, but he's often quite incredibly intelligent. But I remember one day he sent us a change in the script. He faxed it down to a hotel, and it highlighted all of the lines that needed to be changed. But once it came through the fax, we just got this big redacted document. It made no sense at all. It's like, those were the days, had to literally go to the hotel and wait for the fax to turn up to see what you were doing for the day. And that was really big, and that was in prime time, and I was the host, and I had a bit of creative control in terms of how we filmed things, and he had a really experienced team in it, and that was really fun. But I still wanted to be that war correspondent, and again, I'm not sure of the timing, but I'd blagged my way over to Timor with a good friend of mine called Aaron Watson, who'd been in a group called Spleen. We're a comedy group. Duncan Sarkis was in that. He's gone on to great things in the film industry. Jesse Griffin's gone on to great things through Wilson Dixon, and he's directing. He's married to Jackie Van Beek, and he's directing Educators, which I really love, amongst a whole lot of other really great work. And Aaron's produced, he became a content tour guide, then he's produced a whole lot of films. I think Jackie Van Beek, one of Jackie Van Beek's ones, and some of her shorts, and a couple of others that have just come out recently. And so we blagged our way into Timor, and we made a documentary, and we shot it on borrowed Hi8 cameras. I think the really good way to make things is to tell people that you're going to do a thing. And I remember telling people in the bar at the comedy club, whether it was the Classic at the time, might have been Kitty O'Brien's, and saying, "I'm going to go to East Timor and I'm going to make a documentary about the war." And everyone went, "That'll never happen." But because you told people, you had to have it happen. Otherwise, every time they saw you, go, "How's that thing going?" "Oh, I haven't really got it off the ground." And so we did that, and we ended up getting editing it together. It was never probably going to screen anywhere, and because I thought, how can I immediately make some money off this? I thought, well, I can get it screened if I put it in the comedy festival, but in order for it to be a live show, then how do I make it live? And so I basically just cut it into two halves, and then I provided the voiceover live. So I would basically hit play, and then, like a monkey, I did the script in the correct point, and then paused it at a couple of places to go, so this is what happened then, and whatnot. So it became a kind of a performance piece, but with a documentary. And it's about figuring out, how do you take a piece of work and find a place for people to see it. And then likewise, we shot another one over in Israel, and I think so we came back, and it turned into like a half-hour TVNZ thing it was called Christmas in Bethlehem. So they screened it, I think on Christmas Eve, late at night, without really telling anyone it was on. But it also became like a 5-part radio series as well, dispatches from Bethlehem or something like that, for RNZ. And so that storytelling, I'd already, and playing around even with early forms of documentary radio / podcast type things. There was a great guy from the UK, and a lot to be said for great commissioning editors. This guy, John Dryden, came over to make stuff for RNZ within the drama department. He made Off the Wire, which then morphed into 7 Days, with the down low concept. But at one stage, he'd seen me on Off the Wire, and he said, "I want you to make something." And I said, "What?" He said, "I don't care. Make something. You're ready. Make something." And I was on tour with Mike King, and I said, "I'll make a thing called Dispatches from the Provinces, because you've always got this time on tour." I said, "I'll turn up in a town with my little radio recorder, and I'll run around and I'll find a story in the hour that I have from arriving in town, and then going and doing something else." And so we made this. You turn up, and you would have to find a story. You get enough content to make it. And then cut it together. And I love working with audio. Audio is amazing. Anyone, pictures are a great flavor, but audio, you can tell a great story with audio.
So, can I just roll back a little bit I've just got a little caution. We're going to have a little time here to say Zoom
I saw that, 9:33.
So we'll stop and start again, if that's okay with you. How much time do you have? How much time do you have?
How much time do you want? Are you going to chop it up?
Probably a little bit, just for tidiness, but essentially,
Yeah.
would you keep it raw? And I think that's the style that I really want to go with this podcast.
Okay.
Just with you talking about, you've already in the industry, people are coming to you for ideas, but was there a time when you had to? I mean, I've recently been going through the pitch hell that pitches can be for people who are on the outside. Was there a time when you were on the outside and you had to pitch your idea to a panel, to a thing like a doc pitch or a New Zealand On Air or a film commission? And because that's it's totally intimidating, and a lot of people fail at that point and they get beaten up and they stop. Do you have an experience where you had to pitch an idea formally or
I've
informally?
certainly pitched live shows. I'm sure I probably pitched something. I know I've gone and sat in network executives' offices, but I kind of, because I'm not a very good producer, I kind of used people who had contacts,
Right, yes.
who would then go and pitch, or there was often a lot of people came to me and said, like Radar Across the Pacific was Peter Bell's idea, and Peter Bell had that 12 years before we even got it funded, and he said, I've got this idea to do this show across the Pacific. And I went, yeah, man, pitch that. I'd love to go on holiday through the Pacific. And he just kept going and going and going. And I think that's the thing. Often an idea won't be rejected because it's a bad idea. Right. It'll be rejected because the timing is not right, because they have a whole lot of other people that they have to look at funding. They've got certain things. And I think it's really helpful if you ever get the chance to be on a panel as the person who has to allocate funding for whatever it is. Or I say to people, if you've got to judge things, I've judged all kinds of stuff from kids' sand sources through to museum competitions, all kinds of things. It's really, and comedy, it really helps you focus, and you get a real sense of understanding of what it means to be on the other side of that panel. Yeah. And when people get knocked back, I sometimes think it's not the most talented people that get through, it's the people who can persevere. Yes. And that's not to say that they don't have loads of talent, but I've seen plenty of really talented comics, for example, who apply for the Billy T and they get knocked back and they think, well, I'm not going to do that again. If I can't see my worth, I won't do it. It's like, well, that's really stupid. Imagine playing rugby and not making the first 15 and go, well, I won't do that. And if you look at it, I like those, I like a comeback story, and so with corporate, you get to see lots of people speaking at after dinner things, and you listen to a lot of these sports players, and they are knocked back and knocked back. They're in their second 15s, their third 15s, they're knocked back, and suddenly they're there and they get a break or thing, and they take that opportunity. And I think this is the same. Of course you're going to get knocked back. Doesn't mean you've got a bad idea. Sometimes it means your idea is it is really stupid. But sometimes it's just about timing. And when I went through Alan Hall, the drama department down at Otago, their big thing that we took away was you've got to make your own work. And my theory was, if no one's going to fund my work, I will fund it myself. I funded myself to Timor, to Israel, my own live shows. Budgets are a little different. But you got to, if you don't believe in you, why should anyone else?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that perseverance, it's that tenacity, it's that determination that you think makes the difference.
Yeah, and serendipity. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. Like I'm led to believe through Jane and Mallet Jam that I got Off the Radar was never supposed to be me. I think it was supposed to be Marcus Lush, and he couldn't do it. And then I did it, and literally, sometimes you get a break, and that was a break. Probably I credit it with being one of the biggest breaks of my career, because suddenly, there is a show that is literally all about me standing in a field. It wasn't all about me. It was a lot about me, but it was actually what it was really about was community and sustainability. And what I like to think of it is what ended up being just a really subtle parody of a whole lot of those earnest live in a field shows that were going on at the time.
Good luck.
Because to be fair, I was a bit crap at it, and literally everything I did went wrong. And we never set out, and again, there's that subtle balance. We never set out for anything to go wrong,
right?
But things just went wrong because I'm kind of inept, and they managed to cut that in a way that it really didn't make it look as if
It was charming.
Even with the best of intent. It was, it was charming, and it was family viewing, and it screened on a Sunday back when the ratings were the biggest they probably ever were in the country, and it rated really well on a Sunday night. And the other thing that I've always kind of wanted to do with work, because I remember it as a kid, is to create work that you can sit and watch with your kids and your grandparents.
Yes.
I think it's really, that intergenerational scenario. And so I do it with live shows, with doco work and stuff. And, because I think that's kind of important, that shared experience. And I'm not sure whether that still kind of happens much. I know we do it here at home. We love to sit down and watch a show together and talk about it. But for a lot of people, that's, and even within community, you would watch a show and it was on this, and everybody knows this. The show would be on this a Sunday or whatever it was, and you would watch, and then, oh God, you've got to wait till the next week to watch it. And there's a kind of a sense of anticipation. And, now you literally can almost watch anything you want except what you actually want to watch, which is on another platform. And then you can't get that platform. So you sign up for a free 2 weeks. It's a different kind of world. But again, you don't get to have those moments of serendipity, I suppose, without having put yourself in the right place at the right time, or just doing what you do and someone else sees that and brings it on. So a lot of the stuff I've done, particularly on TV, were other people's ideas, and they came to me, or they had an idea for me. I know I pitched a lot of stuff, eventually got checkered passed on.
What was it like bringing that? I mean, that feeling when they said you're greenlit and you're ready to go.
Oh, really great, actually. Yeah, superb. And it was a huge amount of work to get it up and going, because I had a particular view of how I wanted it, which may not necessarily have been everybody's view of how it should have been. And then it ended up being a little bit fraught in that the network, from what I gathered, really hated it. Well, I loved it. I thought it was great, and I wanted to really push the boundaries of what it meant to blend theatre with real life. 90 seconds of uncut. No one puts 90 seconds of uncut shot on where stuff is happening through the shot and it's changing on to the next person. And I would say, you can't cut away. It's got to be done live. And this may have been just a really stupid. I like to think it was an artistic decision on my behalf that I really had to argue for. I wanted to do stuff in camera. I didn't want, as much as we had lots of, green screen and all that, I wanted the stuff to be as real as possible. And we didn't have a huge budget, so we didn't use. Part of the brief was to bring actual New Zealanders in to play these roles of people who were similar than what they were. So the Mad Butcher as Jackson Barry, the brilliant Casey and Karana Bird as the two women who accompanied Brana and Mokekehu on their trip down the thing, because that whole thing was about food. And just to say, hey, look, these were ordinary people doing things that they didn't think were extraordinary. And I wanted it to be a celebration of us as a people as much as anything. So yeah, it was kind of fraught. And then I think when it got to the network, I don't know quite what happened. I think the network executive we'd had had been really great for a long time and had seen all the scripts and loved it, was bringing, I'm going to say critiques, but actually it was criticism that I don't necessarily know were theirs.
Right.
It sounded like it was kind of coming from somebody else. I don't know whether the person had changed. And there was a thing to say, we thought it would be more like this particular program here, which they had on at the time, which was fast cuts and all stuff going on. And it was rating well. And then I just kind of watched fall away in the ratings over the next few weeks after that. We thought it would be like that. Well, it's not. And actually, if you go back to the original scripts, almost like shot for shot, we had scripted it like a story so you could read exactly how things were going to be played out. There should have been no surprises that it turned out the way it did, because we had to give them scripts.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't make anything after that because it had made me kind of mad and things had changed, and so I sort of stopped. Was it a mutual decision? Possibly. I don't know. I didn't really pitch for a whole lot of stuff after that because it had been a kind of a fraught experience. But a great, and again, just the power of having a great producers, Alex Baser, getting, just driving it on through and working with Peter Bell, who I've worked with a lot over the year. I went to university with him. So again, relationships are really important. Sometimes it kind of is who you know.
Yeah. And I think that's where community comes in, and launching yourself into another film community and meeting producers, meeting directors, meeting cinematographers, meeting people that will help you bring your vision to life, whatever that vision is, and you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not it's not an individual pursuit; it's a team pursuit, and that's what I've learned.
Which is really different from stand-up, and like stand-up is ruthlessly individualistic,
Yes.
and you succeed or fail almost upon your own merits in those minutes that you were standing on stage. There's a lot of prep that goes into it, and a mental attitude and all of that kind of stuff. But it is, at the end of it, it's a bit like, I just saw a photo of a tennis player on the news, so I'll use that analogy. That you can have all the coaches and all the mental things and all the things, but on the court, it is them and their decision, and they are the ones that will live with the infamy or the glory as they go on. And stand-up's a bit like that, and it's difficult bringing that to a much more collaborative medium of TV or film. I'm not sure that I'm all that good at that. It's quite narcissistic, so
well, passionate.
But then probably passionate. Let's go with passionate. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
It's a good word.
It's
a good coverall.
It is a good coverall.
Yeah.
And it explains a lot.
Yeah.
Can I just come back a little bit and talk about the change from moving from Hamilton to Auckland? Was there a cultural shift at the time? I mean, Hamilton still has a reputation for the band, and you made this move to a bigger centre. Did that help with him?
I did it through the transition of Otago. So 4 years at Otago.
Yeah.
So, and my experience with Hamilton is probably kind of different in that I was a rural kid. I lived in Hamilton for 5 years at boarding school. So I was institutionalized in Hamilton.
Right. Yes.
I think it was probably my parents optimistically thinking we'd best get him used to this because it's probably his future of being institutionalized. And so it was a kind of a strange thing. And then, you go off to university for 4 years, and then, we moved up to Auckland. And I guess so the cultural shifts were kind of at periods in your life. I went from Hamilton to university and thus experienced the need. And then by the time I had wafted my way through that, then moved to Auckland at the end of that, thinking, God, what am I going to do now? And found myself within a scene already through comedy. Comedy was a gateway.
Gotcha.
And that was one of the plans. Comedy will be a gateway to get me into the scene, to get to meet various people who are doing these great things. And so I knew some comedians. I started doing comedy. You would meet more people from that creative world. So theatre makers, theatre builders, literally festivals, all of that kind of stuff. So I was much more immersed in that live performance world. Yeah. And again, bringing a lot of that ethos of creating your own work, whilst I never put them together, both the initial basement theatre underneath the waterfront and the new basement theatre that became the Silo. I was in the people who swept the crap out of them and literally helped to build those establishments in a way. That was the kind of attitude that was around at the time. We don't have a venue, let's build a venue. So that's always been that kind of attitude. Yeah. And then doing comedy, it was always that thing to hope that someone would notice you, to get picked up for a presenting role. Pulp comedy really helped. And then, as I say, newsflash, and then Hidden in the Numbers. There's a lot of stuff on Māori television, which again was something that came to me through Johnny Givens and various others. And again, there's something to be said. The two people I look at who I think were just what great mentors of work. So John Dryden at RNZ, who said, just make whatever you want. And I remember talking to at Māori television, he was the boss there, made loads of TV. I can't remember his name, which is embarrassing for me. Big Māori producer. Anyway, and I remember telling him once what we were doing on B&B, and he says, I don't need to know. You guys are the judges of what you do. You know if it's good or not. If you think it's good, it's good. Nice. And I just thought the freedom that allows a creative is phenomenal. If it wasn't going to be good, they were going to say, this is not good. So yeah, I think that kind of freedom is phenomenal.
Yeah. I think really we've gone quite through a lot of material.
I can. I am my own specialist subject. I could talk about me for ages.
I think really this is really aimed particularly at the Waikato film family, and what I liked about what you were saying about going to Auckland and going into those situations is you created your own whānau and you created your own networks and things like that. And I think that's kind of one of the things what I want to talk about, particularly for the Waikato people, is that yes, you're not in Wellington film, you're not in Auckland with TV, but you can create your own things here with the strong family that you've got. I mean, some really amazingly talented people come out of this region and live in this region. It's amazing what gets made here. And a lot of them complain about, we're just in the Hamilton, we get ignored. Well, it's not about being Hamilton. It's about the stuff that you make. It's about the stories that you tell.
Yeah, and you can be based somewhere, but it doesn't mean that you're limited to there. I mean, your work can tell the story of your region, but it can be seen all over the world. You put something up on the internet, corporate video, whatever it is, and and someone overseas is watching and think, "Wow, who does this?" And it depends. There's lots of things, opportunities, lifestyle, family commitments that has you living in a certain place. But I think if you limit yourself to your geographical region, think, oh, well, I'm here and I've got to only work in this region.
Right.
What does that say about your love for that region and the stories that are there to be told? You have as many stories to tell and as many ways of showcasing them as you do in the Waikato region as you do anywhere else. And in fact, in some ways, there is something to be said to be in a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I remember I went to the UK to try to do comedy, and I was the smallest of the fish, and it was not what I wanted. And I made a conscious decision in some ways to come back to New Zealand to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond because I thought I would have more chance of being seen. Right. And as it turned out, I was. Had I stayed in the UK, would I have been seen over there? And could I have had a big career over there? I will never know the answer to that. In some alternate universe somewhere, I've collected a BAFTA for my award-winning comedy correspondence for the BBC. But I didn't. I came back here.
Yeah.
And so I think don't denigrate your region with people who are in there because it seems smaller than somebody else's. It's what's that great line? There are no small parts, only small actors.
That's so true.
And the other thing about it is, it's sometimes easier to connect with people. Your distance from the decision makers in the Waikato is probably far less than it is in somewhere like Auckland, where it's got to go through a whole chain of bureaucracy if you're doing corporates or film structures or festivals or whatever it is. Get amongst it and celebrate that. It's actually an advantage. Because if you go to a big city, it's so hard sometimes. If you're not in a scene, it's hard to get back into this. And if you're in somewhere like, Hamilton, you've got film club, you've got people making stuff, you can put yourself out there and go, hey, anyone need something else? And I would say the other thing to do these days as well is there is an incredible ability that you have sitting at a home computer to really upskill on all the little facets of filmmaking. I think I'm just going to make something. I'm going to figure out how to do editing. I'm not going to be an editor, but if I can understand how that works, then it's going to make my filmmaking better. I'm going to challenge myself to take a story and, as you would do in journalism, go, how do I tell this story in 1 minute? And there are no shortage of. I say to people, competitions are great. I just watched an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, which I'm really loving. Resisted it for ages, but now I love it because of the lessons in career that it has to people. And there was an old, much older drag queen that had come through a whole lot of stuff and done all these pageants, and they got knocked out early on. He said, in my career, I've come to realize with competitions, just turning up is the most important thing.
Yes.
Because we all remember, if they hadn't turned up to the competition for whatever reason, we would never have seen them up to episode 5 and gone, wow, what a fascinating character. So again, the way that you might not win a competition, but it's often not the winners who may then go on further to an incredible career. It's being seen, the likes of turning up to events and things like that, and just not forcing your way in, but just being a part of it and offering to help For people, I'm talking now about people who want to get established.
Mm.
But if you're at WinTech or media school or anywhere like that, you've already got a group of people around you who have a similar kind of goal,
Mm.
and use their skills and offer yours up, even if it's, if someone's making a film and you've got nothing on that week and you go, hey, look, do you need some help? I can make some coffee. I can do a runner. Just hang out. And even if you're at a higher level in your career and you've got some spare time, it's really fun to be around other people creating, and that energy feeds off itself. And you never know, again, that serendipitous conversation with someone who's standing around while you're watching a gaffer do that thing, whatever it is they do with their, who knows where that's going to lead to.
Exactly. Just for you now, what are some, you're in a great place in your career and you're happy with where you are?
Am I?
I don't know.
Am I?
So you've got talent, you've got ability. What is it that drives you now?
Narcissism and narcissism and a lack of options. I'm not even joking. And it's really interesting. Like, a lot of my career now is unseen by people because I do a lot of corporate stuff. And when you're a stand-up, you want to be true to the art, and then the corporate comes along. You want to do some corporate because it pays really, really well. Phenomenally. So I've done lots of that, and I really love it. You can still see, it's like corporate videos. It's the same thing. I'm a filmmaker. I don't know that I want to do corporate videos. You can stay true to your art and hone your skills and get better at your craft by being paid to do it.
Yeah.
There's nothing, you don't sell your soul just because you're doing corporate stuff, or it depends on what you're doing. But, I'm still telling the same material, the same stories. The problem is I've got to generate new content, and often within this world of corporate, you don't want to be putting new stuff out there if you're doing pieces. So I've got to generate new content. I've just written a new live show on the history of intoxication in New Zealand, which I premiered down at the Fringe in Dunedin. So I find creating material live is really good. I think there's probably a great TV series in the history of intoxication in New Zealand. It's bonkers.
Yes.
I probably will pitch that to somebody at some stage, in one form or another. There's a lot of stories I wanted to. I moved away from directing. I really feel like it's going to be a director of documentaries on TV, and I moved away from really getting into that. Is it too late now at 50 to go into that field?
Come on now.
I don't know. So I'm also thinking about older filmmakers. I'm really fascinated. I must be getting old at longevity of career. What do artists do when they reach a certain age? You've got to constantly reinvent yourself. And I remember I really love the soundtracks of Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, and their soundtracks are amazing. And I had a chance to fly over and I saw them perform their soundtracks with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And here were these two guys who love each other and whose careers have come together, and they're making this incredible work, very different from what they made as young punks back in the day, or through their mid-career work. And I just thought how great it is to see two people who still love doing what they're doing, and who have moved from that outsider into, you don't really get more mainstream than the Hamer Hall with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and 3,000 people a night sold out for a week sort of thing. So I just find it really fascinating to see what other people are doing with their career and that constant reinvention, and coming up with new work or new people to work with. So that's not to say that it's not hard. We were talking at the start around the GFC. I remember the GFC last time, and I think it came just after we'd done Off the Radar, and I had all this corporate work was starting, and I thought this was going to be great. And their financial sphincters clenched, because a corporate MC, we're nice to have. Hopefully now we've cemented our place in there where they go, yeah, they're a nice to have because they're actually really good at what they do. Never underestimate that if you are good at what you do, you bring a skill to it. That getting someone out with their iPhone to film a person to send off, a link for a conference or whatnot. We've all seen that. We thought you could have spent a little bit of money that person would look really great, And again, that move to virtual platforms. How many of us have seen really crappy presentations on virtual platforms that you thought with a little bit of expense they could have just made that a bit better? So there's heaps of opportunity, but artistically, just going to keep telling stories. I think doing corporate, telling stories, finding new stories to tell, I'm having a chat with a guy I know that has been trying to get stuff with me for ages, and he's a really successful producer, and he came up with a concept around something the other day, and I thought, yeah, that's really great. Going to go and have a meeting with him, and who knows what's going to happen. There's so many more platforms now.
And it's having the open mind and the open. I saw something on the back of a moving truck that said, "Luck is preparation meets opportunity." Luck is.
Oh yeah.
And it's having that open mindset and being able to say yes. And maybe you have to make it work on the fly, and maybe you have to adjust your thinking and the way you present yourself and the way you work. But it's up to you. And
life brings other challenges, Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old now, and so I want to, I want to spend time around them. So that thought of just sort of going off for 5 months to film a documentary in Mongolia is probably not. That's not something that works within my my family dynamic, and I'm not that young person anymore, or that person for whom that's an option in a way, because I don't think that is something I would particularly like. So yeah, you figure out what you do within your constraints, but constraints can be really good. When we were doing theatre, stand-up, whatnot, I toured the Canadian Festival, there were always these constraints, and you had to work within those constraints and figure out how to make it work. Yes. And they can be incredibly beneficial. When there's a whole lot of stuff you can't do, you have to think, well, what can I do?
And I think for me, there's a parallel with photography too, and especially in the press world, where you don't have days to plan and prep and have assistants and have everything ducks in a row. No, it's where the bad weather we can come back. You have to find the picture wherever that picture is, and it's up to you to be able to have the vision, the curiosity, the tenacity to find that picture that's hidden in the situation somewhere. There's always a beautiful picture.
Always a beautiful picture.
What's that?
There's always a beautiful picture. Yeah. I think my biggest hindrance is probably procrastination and laziness.
Well,
what could I have achieved if I wasn't so lazy?
Well, I think you've achieved a hell of a lot in a short space of time.
I could have achieved more.
But that's the thing. That's the hunger. That's the passion. That's the tenacity. That's you're not done yet. So, and I've got
another 15 years, and again, you look back, what's that, 60, 65? You look back and you think, where was I 15 years ago? And I was nowhere, and there's still, I'm looking at a bookshelf. There's one behind me, and there's another one over there with a whole lot of books that I bought around New Zealand and all kinds of things, most of which I haven't read. There's stories in every single one of those. And when I think of that topic, and my wife's just got another one that she's really keen on at the moment, I just said, look, let's put another show on the Fringe next year around certain things so we can do that. And I'm just looking, literally any one of those books I could pick up, and there's a great story, a new live show, there's anything in those, and it's just, there's no shortage of material. It's your willpower and your opportunity, and as you say, being in sometimes the luck. What did you say, that great quote? Luck is what?
Luck is preparation meets opportunity. Yeah, you're not lucky. You prepared for this, and you were there, and you grabbed on it. Hey, look, thank you very much. I appreciate your morning and your time, and I will. Will be very.
I'm going to go wash it. Well, I'm going to go and wash that spot out of my t-shirt. I need to invest in new t-shirts. Sense of small details.
We'll leave it there. And just thank you.
Thank you. Great to chat.
Yeah, and
because here's the other thing. Here's the other thing for people who are thinking about their careers is what you're doing at the moment. I often find I discover as much about myself when I'm asking other people questions as I do about answering questions. And actually, the other thing is when people start asking, when people put you in a format like this, is there anyone out there who's going, oh God, I don't know, get a friend of yours and sit down and be the interview subject and get them to interview you so you could try to figure out what exactly it is that's going on. Again, there's so many techniques around how to figure out what you want to do and where you're going and what you've done. So as I say, I could talk for ages. Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's very beneficial. Inspired.
Good.
Got to go and do something with my day.
Yeah.
Got to go write an invoice. Yeah.
Cool.
All righty. We'll catch you later.
Thank you, man. Cheers.